The royal palace of Arvalis was built on high white cliffs that overlooked a sea of silver waves. Its towers rose like shining spears, its walls covered in crystal patterns that caught the light of two suns. Inside, however, there was no calm. The palace servants rushed in and out of great halls, guards checked their weapons twice, and courtiers whispered behind silk sleeves. Something rare was about to happen. A human was coming. Princess Lyra sat on her throne, hands clenched tight on the arms. She tried to look relaxed, but her heart betrayed her. Every noble eye in the hall was on her, waiting to see how she would act. She was heir to the throne of Arvalis, the jewel of the Nalari people. She had been trained since childhood to be strong, calm, and regal. But today she felt like her chest was full of fire. Humans were new to their world. For decades, the Nalari had heard of them only through stories, rough, violent beings who had fought endless wars among themselves before turning to the stars. Some stories said humans were brilliant strategists. Others said they were reckless beasts. Allies only recently, humans had offered soldiers to stand beside the Nalari in the growing galactic conflict. And now, for the first time, one of those. Soldiers would serve inside her father's palace. Lyra had thought she was ready. She had studied human culture, watched recordings of their speech, their movements, their strange smiles. She had promised herself she would treat the meeting as a simple matter of diplomacy. But when the great doors opened and the human entered, all her training began to crack. He was taller than any Nalari guard. His broad shoulders stretched the black uniform of the Terran Defense Force. His face was scarred across the cheek, not ugly but sharp, like stone carved by storms. His eyes, clear gray, unblinking, moved over the hall without fear. While the nobles watched with suspicion, the human walked with the calm of someone who had stood in battlefields far harsher than a royal court. Princess Lyra's throat tightened. The human stopped before her throne. For a long moment, silence ruled the chamber. Every Nalari courtier expected him to kneel, bow low, or speak in elaborate formality. Instead, he placed his fist across his chest and inclined his head only slightly. "Sergeant Daniel Reeve," he said in a voice that carried across the room. "At your service, Princess." That was all. No fear, no trembling, no flowery words. Lyra forced her lips into a calm line, though inside she burned with surprise and something else she could not name. She rose to her feet, her ceremonial robes flowing like water. "Sergeant Reeve," she answered, her voice steady though her pulse was not. "The throne of Arvalis welcomes you. May your service here bring honor to your people and mine." Her words were proper, but her thoughts tangled. He looked at her not as courtiers did, with awe or calculation, but directly, simply, as if she were just a person, not a princess. The courtiers shifted uneasily. Some whispered that the human's bow was disrespectful, others muttered that his lack of fear was dangerous. Lyra ignored them, though every whisper felt like a thorn in her skin. She wanted to appear unshaken, regal. Yet her heart hammered louder with every second Daniel stood there. She stepped down from her throne, a gesture that made the crowd gasp. Princesses did not descend to meet guests, but Lyra could not study him from afar. She needed to see closer. "You have seen war?" she asked, her eyes on the scar across his cheek. "Too much," Daniel replied plainly. "Do you fear serving among strangers?" "No," he said. "Fear wastes time." Some nobles flinched at the bluntness of his tone. Lyra almost smiled at their discomfort. Humans were said to be direct, but hearing it in her hall was something else entirely. She walked slowly around him, studying his armor, the way he stood, balanced yet relaxed. He did not fidget under her gaze, did not bow, deeper to please her. That calm confidence unsettled her more than arrogance would have. "Why were you chosen to serve here?" she asked, testing him. Daniel turned his head slightly toward her. "Because I follow orders, and because my commanders trust me not to break under pressure." His answer struck her like a quiet blow. She thought of her own struggles, how often she feared her temper, how hard she tried to appear calm before her people. This human spoke of pressure as if it were an enemy he had already beaten. She took a slow breath, trying not to let the fire in her chest show on her face. The high chamber. Doors opened again, and her father, King Vaynar, entered with his council. His deep voice carried through the hall. "The human will serve as guard to our court and advisor in matters of war. Treat him with the respect due an ally." The words made the courtiers bow, though their eyes still glimmered with doubt. Lyra turned back to Daniel. For the first time, she noticed the faint scar on his hand, the steady rise and fall of his chest, the strange stillness that made him seem carved of iron. She told herself it was only curiosity, only diplomacy, only duty. But as she returned to her throne, she realized her fingers were trembling slightly. She clenched them into her robes, praying no one noticed. Princess Lyra of Arvalis had met her first human soldier. She had kept her, voice calm, her face still, her words proper. Yet inside, she knew the truth. She was struggling not to let her heart race faster every time his gray eyes met hers. The next morning, the palace of Arvalis woke under golden sunlight. Birds with glass-like wings circled the crystal towers, and banners of blue silk swayed in the breeze. Inside the great hall, however, peace was hard to find. The presence of a human soldier had stirred the court like a stone thrown into still water. Princess Lyra walked with slow steps, her robes whispering along the marble floors. Her head was high, her face calm, but inside she carried a storm. She told herself that Sergeant Daniel Reeve was only a guest, a soldier serving the Alliance, nothing more. Yet her mind kept returning to the way he had looked at her yesterday, steady, fearless, unshaken. No Nalari courtier dared meet her eyes like that. When she entered the council chamber, she found him already there. He stood at the edge of the room, helmet tucked under his arm, uniform neat and dark against the silver walls. He wasn't speaking, wasn't trying to impress anyone. He simply stood, as if waiting for the next battle to begin. Lyra felt her heartbeat rise, but she pressed it down. She was Princess of Arvalis. She would not let a human soldier make her appear weak. The council began their discussions. Generals spoke of border tensions. Nobles argued about supplies. Through it all, Lyra kept noticing Daniel. He did not interrupt, yet when asked for advice, his words were sharp and direct. "We waste time." "Moving slowly," he said at one point when a noble suggested long negotiations. "The enemy will not wait for polite words." The nobles gasped. One even muttered that humans had no manners. But Lyra watched Daniel closely. He didn't flinch. He didn't try to soften his point. He simply spoke the truth as he saw it. When the council ended, Lyra approached him. She had questions boiling inside her chest. "Sergeant," she said, her voice calm but edged with curiosity. "Do you always speak so directly, even to kings and princes?" Daniel met her eyes without hesitation. "Yes. It saves time." Lyra narrowed her gaze. "And if your words offend?" "Then they offend," Daniel replied. "But lies offend worse." For a heartbeat, Lyra forgot she was supposed to appear untouchable. She almost smiled, but quickly turned it into a thoughtful expression. The courtiers around them were already whispering again. She could almost hear their thoughts. "The princess is too curious about the human. She cannot stay calm around him." She straightened her shoulders, trying to push away the fire in her chest. Later that day, she passed through the palace gardens. where silver-leafed trees grew in perfect rows. She expected to find peace among the flowers. Instead, she found Daniel there, walking alone. "You wander without guards?" she asked, stepping closer. He shrugged lightly. "I've walked in worse places than this. A garden doesn't scare me." Lyra tilted her head. "You are not afraid of anything, are you?" Daniel's lips curved in the faintest smile. "Fear keeps people alive, but it doesn't rule me." She studied him, her hands clasped tightly before her to keep them from trembling. No one in her court spoke this way. Everyone around her was careful, delicate, weighed down by tradition. Yet this human stood tall and calm, speaking truth without fear of rank or title. "Do you think us weak?" she asked suddenly. Daniel paused. His gray eyes moved over her, then to the guards in the distance, then back. "No," he said simply. "But I think your people hesitate. In war, hesitation costs lives." The words cut, but they also lit something inside her. She wanted to argue, yet part of her knew he was right. The Nalari had always preferred long councils, endless plans, soft words. But the enemy pressing at their borders would not wait forever. Before she could answer, a sudden sound split the air, an alarm bell, deep and urgent. The garden guards froze, then shouted orders. A messenger ran into the courtyard, face pale. "Raiders at the palace outskirts," he cried. "Enemy ships strike the outer defenses." The garden filled with chaos as guards rushed to their stations. Lyra felt her heart leap. For years she had trained in strategy and in ceremonial blade work, but she had never been so close to danger inside her own home. Before she could give an order, Daniel was already moving. He strapped on his helmet, rifle slung forward, eyes sharp with focus. There was no hesitation, no panic. He looked like a man stepping into a role he had lived 1,000 times before. "Stay here, princess," a guard urged her. But Lyra's feet moved forward, following Daniel instead of retreating. She watched, as he barked quick orders, organizing Nalari guards with crisp efficiency. His voice cut through the panic like steel through silk. Soldiers obeyed him without question. From the balcony above the gardens, Lyra saw enemy ships streaking fire across the outer walls. Small groups of raiders landed near the gates, armed and wild. The Nalari guards stumbled at first, unready for such boldness. But Daniel charged into them with fearless precision, his rifle spitting fire. Lyra's breath caught. He fought not like the careful warriors of her people, but with raw speed and certainty. He threw himself between civilians and raiders, moving with the steady rhythm of someone who knew war as second nature. Without thinking, Lyra drew her ceremonial blade. The silver weapon glimmered in the twin suns. Against every order, against every tradition, she ran down the steps into the fight. She reached Daniel's side just as 2 raiders broke through. He fired one down, but the second leapt at her. Lyra swung, her blade cutting across the alien's armor. The raider fell, and she found herself gasping, standing shoulder to shoulder with the human soldier. Daniel glanced at her, his eyes narrowing behind the helmet's visor. "Stay behind me," he ordered. "Never," Lyra shot back. For a moment their eyes locked in the chaos of battle, his filled with hardened steel, hers with stubborn fire. Different worlds, different training, yet in that instant they fought as one. The raiders began to retreat, their ships pulling back into the skies. Smoke rose from the gates, and the palace grounds were littered with broken weapons. Lyra's chest heaved. Her blade dripped with enemy blood. And Daniel, calm even after the fight, lowered his rifle and scanned the horizon. Without realizing it, she reached out, steadying herself by touching his armored arm. Her fingers lingered longer than they should have. For the first time in her life, Princess Lyra felt her heart race not from fear, but from standing so close to a man who seemed unshakable. And she knew this was only the beginning of her struggle. The palace of Arvalis had not seen a true attack in centuries. Its crystal walls were said to be unbreakable, its defenses flawless. But that night, smoke still drifted over the gates, and the scent of burned metal clung to the air. Princess Lyra stood on the balcony outside her chambers, staring at the damage below. Fires glowed in the distance, and guards rushed about, repairing defenses and gathering the wounded. She gripped the railing tight. Her people had always believed the palace was untouchable. Now, for the first time, she felt the truth. Nothing was safe anymore. Her eyes drifted to the courtyard where Sergeant Daniel Reeve moved among the guards. His tall form was easy to spot, even in the chaos. He gave orders with calm authority, checking weapons, reinforcing patrols, and ensuring the wounded were carried to safety. Lyra had fought beside him earlier. She had seen the way he moved through. Battle, fast, steady, fearless. She had seen him shield civilians without hesitation, and she had felt the strange calm that came when she fought near him, as though his strength poured into her. She told herself it was only respect, only admiration for a soldier who had proven himself. But her chest ached with something more confusing, something she dared not name. A knock sounded at her door. Her maid bowed low as she entered. "Your Highness," the maid whispered. "The king requests your presence in the war room." Lyra nodded, gathering her composure. She followed the maid through long halls lit by glowing crystals. Servants bowed as she passed, though their eyes were full of fear. Word of the raid had already spread through the palace. Some whispered. It was only the beginning. In the war room, maps and star charts covered the walls. Generals and nobles crowded around the table, their voices sharp with panic. Daniel stood at the far side, helmet under his arm, listening in silence. When Lyra entered, her father, King Vaynar, gestured for calm. "The enemy tested us tonight. They will test us again. We must be ready." One noble spoke quickly. "Your Majesty, this is proof that humans bring danger to our walls. If not for their presence, the raiders would not dare strike the palace itself." Lyra's anger flared. But before she could answer, Daniel's voice cut through the room. "The raiders struck because you hesitate," he said firmly. "They see weakness. They think they can bleed you slowly. They are wrong, but only if you act." Gasps rippled through the nobles. A human soldier speaking so boldly in the royal war room? Several turned to the king, expecting anger, but Vaynar only stroked his beard in thought. Lyra found her eyes locked on Daniel. His tone was steady, his gaze unshaken, even with the full weight of Nalari nobility pressing down on him. "Explain," the king said at last. Daniel stepped closer to the table. "They probed your defenses tonight. They will return in greater numbers. Waiting will only give them the chance to choose the battlefield. Strike first, and you take away that choice." Murmurs filled the room. Some nobles scoffed. Others nodded uncertainly. Lyra's heart pounded. He was right. She knew it, though few in the room wanted to admit it. After the council ended, Lyra walked out into the torch-lit corridor. To her surprise, Daniel followed. "You spoke boldly," she said, her voice low. "Would you rather I lied?" he asked. "No," she admitted. "But you risked offending half the court." "They'll get over it," Daniel replied simply. She studied him in the dim light. He carried himself with the calm of a mountain, unshaken by politics, unshaken even by danger. She envied it, even admired it. Before she could speak again, alarms rang out once more. Shouts echoed through the halls. Guards sprinted past them. "Another attack?" Lyra gasped. Daniel's expression hardened. "No, this is bigger." Together, they rushed to the outer walls. From the balcony, Lyra saw the night sky filled with fire. Enemy ships rained down missiles, explosions tearing into the palace outskirts. The sound of battle echoed through the city. This was no small raid. This was war. Daniel snapped his rifle into place and barked orders to the guards around him. "Hold the gates! Protect the civilians! Move!" Lyra's blade was already in her hand. She turned to him. "I will fight beside you." He glanced at her, his eyes sharp through the smoke. "Princess, this is not your duty." "My people are out there," she answered, fire in her voice. "I will not hide behind walls while they bleed." For a moment, he hesitated. Then he nodded once. "Stay close." They ran together into the chaos. The palace grounds had become a battlefield. Raiders poured through breaches in the outer wall. Guards clashed with them in desperate combat. Civilians screamed, rushing for cover. Daniel moved like a storm. His rifle cracked again and again, each shot precise. He shouted commands, steadying. Panicked soldiers, forcing them into formation. Lyra fought at his side, her ceremonial blade flashing silver in the torchlight. She was no stranger to training, but real battle was chaos unlike anything she had faced. Still, she pushed forward, refusing to falter. When a raider lunged at her, Daniel shoved him back with his rifle, giving her the opening to strike. When Daniel was nearly surrounded, Lyra cut down one of his attackers, saving him in turn. Side by side, they held the line, their movements clashing, yet somehow fitting together, as though forged in the same fire. At last, after what felt like hours, the enemy began to retreat. Their ships pulled back into the night sky, leaving behind wreckage and silence. Lyra stood panting, her blade dripping, her chest burning with exhaustion. Around them, guards cheered weakly, relief washing over the battered defenders. Daniel lowered his rifle, scanning the field. His armor was scorched, his face streaked with smoke, but his eyes remained steady. Lyra realized her hand was still clutching, his arm for balance. She pulled back quickly, her cheeks hot, though the air was cool. "You fight well," Daniel said simply. "So do you," she replied, trying to sound calm, though her heart raced wildly. She turned her gaze to the ruined walls. The palace was scarred but still standing, and she knew one thing clearly. Without Daniel, it might not have survived the night. But what unsettled her most was not the battle, not the smoke, not even the enemy's strength. It was how much calmer. She felt standing beside the human soldier, and that truth frightened her more than any enemy. The palace of Arvalis was quiet again, but the silence was heavy. The battle scars had not yet been repaired, and smoke still clung to the outer walls. Guards stood at every corner, sharper and more restless than before. Yet inside the grand halls, another kind of storm was building, whispers. Princess Lyra heard them as she walked past columns of crystal and tapestries of her ancestors. Courtiers bowed low when she passed, but when they thought she was out of earshot, their voices sharpened like knives. "She fights beside the human soldier. Too close, too often. It is not proper. The princess cannot stay calm around him. She forgets herself." Lyra kept her chin high, her face a mask of calm, but every word pressed into her chest like a thorn. She wanted to shout at them, to remind them that Daniel had saved their lives, that he had shielded the palace with his own blood. Yet a princess did not shout in the halls. A princess endured. That night, she sat in her chamber, staring into a mirror of polished silver. Her reflection looked regal enough, dark hair braided in golden rings, robes neat and shining, but her eyes betrayed her. They carried the fire she tried so hard to hide. A knock came at her door. "Your Highness," said the maid softly, "the human guard requests to speak with you. He waits in the east corridor." Lyra's heart gave a sharp twist. She should refuse. Meeting him alone would only feed the whispers, but she could not stop herself. She rose, her steps quick, and made her way through quiet halls until she found him. Daniel stood in the corridor, the moonlight from tall windows falling across his uniform. He looked the same as ever, calm, steady, as if no battle could shake him. "Princess," he said, inclining his head. Lyra folded her arms, trying to appear composed. "Why do you seek me at this hour?" He held her gaze. "Because I wanted to make sure you are safe. After tonight's fighting, I thought—" "I do not need protection," she interrupted, sharper than she meant. Daniel did not flinch. "No, you don't. But you deserve honesty." That answer startled her. She stepped closer, her voice low. "Honesty? Then tell me why you treat me as if I were ordinary. Every courtier bows until their backs break. Every noble drowns me in flattery. Yet you stand before me and speak as if I were just another soldier beside you." Daniel's expression didn't change. "Because that's how I see you. You're not just a princess. You're a fighter. You took up your blade when others hesitated. You bled for your people. That deserves respect more than titles do." Lyra's breath caught. She had expected excuses, perhaps an apology. Not this. His words struck deeper than any courtly praise ever had. She had wanted to be seen as strong, not as a fragile jewel locked in a tower. And here, a human soldier saw her that way without hesitation. But her fire rose again, tangled with confusion. "Do you realize what people are saying about me?" she demanded. "That I cannot stay calm around you? That I am distracted?" Daniel gave a small shrug. "People will always whisper. It's what they do when they're afraid." His calmness only fueled her turmoil. She stepped even closer, her voice almost trembling. "And are you afraid? Afraid of what they whisper? Afraid of me?" For the first time, Daniel's gray eyes softened. "No, I don't fear you, princess. I respect you." Silence filled the corridor. Lyra felt her heartbeat quicken, her thoughts twist into knots. She had faced raiders with steady hands, had stood before generals without flinching, yet here she was, struggling to breathe under the weight of one soldier's words. Before she could speak, footsteps echoed down the hall. A messenger ran toward them, breathless. "Your Highness!" the guard shouted. "Urgent news from the border villages! Enemy forces have struck again! Entire settlements are falling! The council demands your presence!" Lyra's heart dropped. War was no longer at the gates. It was spreading across her people's lands. She turned to Daniel, her fire steadied by duty. "Then there is no time to waste. Walk with me." They moved quickly through the halls until they reached the council chamber. Already nobles were shouting over one another, their faces pale with fear. "The border defenses are collapsing," one cried. "We must pull back and guard the capital," another shouted. "No! Abandoning the villages will turn the people against us." Lyra entered, her voice cutting through the noise. "Enough!" The chamber fell into silence. She looked around at the nobles, her gaze sharp. "Our people are in danger. We cannot argue while they bleed." Daniel stood at the edge of the room, silent, but Lyra could feel his steady presence beside her. It gave her strength. A general spoke carefully. "Princess, if you ride to the front lines yourself, it would inspire the soldiers. But tradition forbids it. The heir must remain in safety." Lyra's jaw tightened. Tradition again. Tradition had kept her locked away in silk halls while others decided her fate. Tradition had whispered that she should never fight, never lead, never stand as an equal. Her gaze slid to Daniel. He met her eyes, and in that calm steel she saw no doubt, no hesitation, only trust. "I will ride," Lyra said firmly. Gasps echoed through the room. "I will fight beside my people, and I will not go alone." Her father, the king, rose slowly. His gaze lingered on her, then shifted to the human soldier. "You would take him with you?" "Yes," Lyra answered. Her voice did not shake. "Sergeant Reeve has proven himself in battle. I trust him more than any whispering noble in this hall." The room buzzed with outrage and disbelief, But Lyra stood tall, her fire no longer hidden. The enemy was rising, the court was divided, and her people needed strength. And she knew now that the calm she struggled to keep was not weakness. It was a weapon she was learning to wield. Daniel gave her the faintest nod, as if to say, "Then we fight together." And for the first time, Lyra felt not alone, but ready. The morning sun rose pale over the palace of Arvalis. Its towers gleamed faintly, but the scars from the recent raid still marred the outer walls. Guards patrolled every corridor, and servants hurried to repair broken gates and shattered glass. "Princess," Lyra walked through the palace, her steps steady, yet her mind was restless. Since the last battle, whispers had grown louder. Nobles were uneasy about her closeness to Sergeant Daniel Reeve. Some said it was improper. Others whispered that the princess could not control her emotions near the human soldier. Lyra ignored them. Her thoughts were not on court gossip. They were on the reports arriving from border villages. Enemy forces were attacking faster than anyone had predicted. Entire settlements had fallen. Families were fleeing. Soldiers were dying. The council had gathered to discuss the next move. Lyra entered the chamber with Daniel following her. The nobles glanced at him with suspicion, muttering under their breath. But Lyra ignored them. She had learned to trust her own judgment. "We cannot wait for reinforcements," one general said. "The villages are lost. We must retreat." Lyra shook her head. "Retreat is not an option. Our people need us. We cannot abandon them to die." Daniel's calm voice broke through the room. "We can hold the border if we act together. Hesitation will cost lives. Plans are only useful if we act on them." The nobles looked at him as though he were speaking a different language. Yet Lyra could not deny the truth in his words. She had seen his discipline, his clarity, his courage. That man could lead soldiers, even in the chaos of war, where others might falter. Hours later, as Lyra walked to her private chambers, a sudden commotion erupted nearby. Screams echoed through the hall. Lyra's heart skipped. Her instincts, honed through years of training, screamed danger. She and Daniel rushed toward the noise. In the east corridor, a shadow moved too quickly for anyone to react. A blade flashed. In the dim light, a masked assassin lunged straight at Lyra. Time slowed. Daniel reacted first. He shoved her backward, taking the full force of the attacker's strike. The blade scratched his armor, but he held firm, pushing Lyra out of harm's way. The assassin tried to strike again, but Daniel's rifle was already aimed, and a single shot rang through the hall. The intruder collapsed, unconscious. Lyra gasped, staring at him. His armor was dented, smoke curling from the scratch marks, yet he remained standing, eyes focused and steady. She realized, with a sudden rush of clarity, how close she had been to danger. You saved me," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I did what was necessary," Daniel replied calmly, though his eyes softened as he looked at her. "You should not have been in the corridor alone." Lyra's cheeks burned. She had been brave in battle before, but standing so close to death, shielded by him, was something else entirely. Something deeper. "Why?" she began, then stopped. Words failed her. She had never felt this mix of fear and trust, of admiration and something more confusing before. Daniel did not answer with flowery words or compliments. He simply checked the hall for further threats and ensured no other guards had been injured. His efficiency, his focus, and his calm presence reminded her why she had come to trust him in the first place. That evening, Lyra sat in her chambers, her blade beside her and maps of the border villages spread across the table. Daniel entered quietly, not disturbing her focus. "Are you all right, Princess?" he asked. Lyra looked up, surprised by his concern. Yes. But today showed me how fragile life is here, even inside my own palace. And yet, she paused, taking a deep breath. Yet you were there. You acted without hesitation. Daniel nodded. It is my duty to protect you, and it is my duty to protect your people. She studied him. His words were simple, but they carried weight. No courtier had ever spoken to her like this. No noble had ever acted so decisively to save her life. And though she had tried to resist her feelings, she felt an unfamiliar warmth, a respect that went beyond duty or title. I should have been more careful, she said softly. I cannot always rely on someone else to keep me safe. You are strong, Daniel replied. Stronger than you know. But even the strongest cannot fight every battle alone. Lyra considered his words. He was right. She had always prided herself on her independence, her skill with a blade, her ability to command soldiers. But strength did not mean isolation. Strength could include trust. And for the first time, she realized she trusted Daniel, not only as a soldier, but as a person who could stand beside her in every danger. Over the next few days, the palace prepared for the coming battle. Lyra trained with her warriors, studied the maps, and strategized with Daniel and her generals. She observed him closely, noting the calm efficiency with which he moved, the clear decisions he made, and the way soldiers followed him without question. Her admiration grew with each passing moment. Not admiration for his strength alone, but for his loyalty, his discipline, and the way he respected her as a partner, not just a princess. One night, Lyra stood on her balcony, looking out over the city. The twin moons reflected on the crystal towers. Daniel joined her silently, standing at a respectful distance. You seem calm, he said after a long moment. I am learning, she admitted. Not just to fight, but to trust. He nodded once, as if he understood exactly what she meant. Trust is earned, he said simply, and you have earned mine. Lyra felt a flicker of warmth. The war was coming, danger was near, and the court was still uncertain. Yet for the first time, she did not feel alone. She had a soldier who had proven himself loyal, brave, and unwavering. And she knew that with him by her side, she could face whatever the enemy brought next. Her heart, which had raced at the sight of a single human before, now carried steady determination. She would lead her people, fight beside her warriors, and face the enemy, because she knew she had someone she could trust completely, and that trust, fragile yet strong, had changed everything. The morning air was tense and heavy with the scent of smoke. The twin sons of Arvalis cast pale light over the shattered borders where enemy forces had gathered. Princess Lyra stood at the edge of the cliff overlooking the battlefield. Her dark robes fluttered in the wind, her blade glinting with the reflection of the rising sun. Beside her, Sergeant Daniel Reeve checked his rifle and surveyed the enemy lines with calm precision. Are you ready? She asked, voice steady but carrying the weight of command. Daniel nodded. We have no other choice. Move carefully. Trust your instincts and trust each other. Lyra took a deep breath. She had trained all her life for this moment. She had studied strategy, politics, and diplomacy, yet nothing compared to the tension that now gripped her chest. She had faced raiders and assassins, yet today's battle would determine the fate of entire villages, entire families, and for the first time, she felt the weight of responsibility not alone, but alongside someone who shared it equally. The battlefield was alive with motion. Nilari warriors lined up behind the crystal barricades, their weapons shining in the morning light. Soldiers whispered among themselves, fear and anticipation tangled in their voices. Above, enemy ships hovered like dark clouds, preparing to strike. Lyra's heart pounded. She clenched her blade, drawing strength from Daniel's presence. He moved beside her, silent but resolute. Together, They stepped forward, addressing the soldiers. "Today," Lyra began, her voice clear and strong, "we defend not just walls, but our homes, our families, our people. Stand with me. Fight with courage, and we will protect all we hold dear." The soldiers cheered, raising weapons into the air. Daniel added a sharp, calm order. "Hold your positions until the enemy comes close. Watch each other's backs. Fight smart. Fight together." The first wave struck without warning. Enemy soldiers poured from their ships, launching fire and chaos onto the battlefield. Nalari warriors hesitated for only a moment before Daniel's calm, commanding presence guided them. He shouted orders, moved with precision, and shielded the weak, all while firing with perfect accuracy. Lyra leapt into the fray, her blade a silver streak cutting through enemy ranks. She felt the familiar rush of battle, but today, something was different. She did not fight alone. Daniel's steady movements beside her anchored her, each glance and subtle gesture guiding her through the chaos. They moved in rhythm, instinctively covering each other's flanks. Lyra noticed how he shielded civilians before himself, how he coordinated the soldiers around them. For the first time, she understood the full measure of his skill, not just strength, but leadership, strategy, and courage. A group of raiders broke through the northern barricade. Lyra lunged to meet them, but one soldier aimed a weapon at her flank. In an instant, Daniel shoved her behind him, taking the blow to his armor. Sparks flew, but he stood firm. "Stay close!" he shouted. Lyra's chest tightened with fear, not of battle, but of losing him. She moved swiftly, cutting down the raiders before they could strike again. Side by side, they fought, a seamless partnership of skill and trust. Hours passed in the chaos of fire, steel, and shouted commands. Slowly, the enemy began to falter. Their formations broke under the relentless coordination of Nalari and human forces. Daniel led precise strikes while Lyra inspired courage in her people. Together, they turned the tide. Finally, the last enemy ship pulled away, retreating into the sky. The battlefield fell silent, the air filled with smoke and the scent of scorched earth. Soldiers cheered, exhausted but victorious. Lyra lowered her blade, chest heaving, but her eyes sought Daniel. He stood beside her, calm as ever, surveying the aftermath. His uniform was scratched, his face streaked with soot, but his eyes were clear and steady. She felt a wave of gratitude, relief, and something more profound. She approached him, her voice soft but firm. "We did it. Because of you, we survived." Daniel shook his head slightly. "Because of you, Princess. You led your people with courage. I only did what was necessary." Lyra studied him, her heart pounding. For days she had struggled to maintain composure around him. She had tried to deny the pull she felt, the trust, the admiration, the deep respect. Yet here, in the quiet aftermath of battle, she no longer wanted to deny it. "You are remarkable," she admitted, "not just in battle, but in the way you think, the way you lead. I have never met anyone like you." Daniel's lips curved in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "And I have never met a princess who could fight like you, strong, smart, unstoppable when she chooses to be." Her cheeks flushed. She had trained her entire life to be strong, to hide her emotions, to act with control. Yet he saw past it all, not to her title, but to the person she was. As the soldiers tended to the wounded and repaired defenses, Lyra realized the significance of the day. Their victory was more than just survival. It was proof that humans and Nalari could stand together, united. And it was proof that she could trust someone fully, without doubt, without fear. King Vanar arrived, his robes flowing in the wind, eyes scanning the battlefield. When he saw his daughter and the human soldier standing side by side, he nodded, a faint smile crossing his face. "You have done well," he said. Both of you. Today, the kingdom owes its survival to courage and to trust. Lyra glanced at Daniel. No words were needed. He understood. Trust had been tested in fire and blood, and it had held strong. That night, as the twin moons rose over Arvalas, Lyra stood on the balcony with Daniel at her side. The city below was quiet, wounded, but safe. The stars reflected in her eyes, but she felt something even brighter, the strength of a bond forged in battle, in trust, and in courage. "I thought I could stay calm," Lyra said softly. "But I was wrong. Calm is not the absence of fire. It is standing with someone beside you, knowing you are not alone." Daniel nodded, his gaze steady. "Then you are calm, princess. Not because you hide your heart, but because you trust it, and trust me." Lyra smiled, feeling a peace she had never known. The war was not over, but today humanity and Nilari had proven they could stand together. And she had proven to herself that trust, courage, and the courage to feel were just as important as the sharpest blade. The galaxy might whisper of new alliances, new battles, and new victories. But in the quiet of the night, one thing was certain. A princess had met a human soldier, and together they had changed the course of history. And for Lyra, that was more important than anything else.